The vast emptiness of deep space was both a comfort and a challenge for the Xalran Dominion, an empire built on advanced technology and dominance across countless star systems. Their fleets moved like shadows, silent and methodical, scanning for resources and potential threats. On this particular journey, the Dominion's flagship, *Ichthar*, was on a routine mission to secure a new sector of space. The crew, accustomed to encountering unknown civilizations and strange phenomena, expected nothing more than routine scans and cataloging of new systems. But that was before the US Resolve * appeared on their sensors. At first, it was a blip, a faint signal, a ghost in the void. The Dominion sensors, sophisticated as they were, could not pin down the source with precision. It wasn't moving with the calculated grace of a typical spacecraft. Instead, it lingered in place, its faint energy signature pulsating like a dying star. The fleet's commander, Jeter, was among the first to notice the anomaly. As the fleet gathered closer to the source of the signal, the image of a ship began to form on their screens, a hulking silhouette, large, ancient, and worn down by time, but unmistakably a warship. "What is that?" muttered Jeter, his voice low, uncertain. He had seen countless ships, but this one was different. Its structure was crude, jagged almost, and seemed out of place compared to the sleek, highly engineered designs of the Dominion. The ship appeared to be barely holding together, as though it had seen 1,000 battles. Its exterior was patched in places, with layers of armor that seemed both primitive and unreasonably thick. The Dominion sensors flared to life as they adjusted their scans. They needed answers, but the more they probed, the more they were baffled. The ship was old, too old, in fact. And yet it carried an energy that defied their understanding. No records in the Dominion's vast archives mentioned anything like it. The energy signatures did not align with any known human technology, nor did they match any species the Dominion had encountered. There was something entirely alien about this vessel, even though it was unmistakably human. Jeter frowned, narrowing his eyes at the data flickering on his screen. There was no sign of a crew. No heat signatures or life signs within the ship. The US Resolve * appeared abandoned, cold, and empty, like a tomb floating in the void. Yet, Jeter couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, waiting. He ordered a closer inspection. "Bring us within scanning range," he commanded, his voice sharper now, almost commanding. "I want a full sweep of that vessel. Whatever it is, we need to know." The Dominion fleet slowly closed in, their sleek ships surrounding the derelict warship. The silence of space stretched on, and it felt heavier now. The crew of the *Ichthar* watched in silence, unsure of what they were about to uncover. As the scanners focused on the human warship, the results began to flicker in front of Jeter. The ship was unnervingly quiet, yet it was still alive in a way that didn't make sense. The ship seemed to be alive. Integrating its own systems, fusing technology with something biological. "Prepare a deeper scan," Jeter ordered, leaning forward in his chair. There was a growing tension in his chest, an instinct he couldn't ignore. There was something more to this ship, and whatever it was, it filled him with unease. What kind of species created a warship like this, one that was both machine and organism, ancient and yet alive? It was a question that would soon lead them down a path no one in the Dominion was prepared for. And it was just the beginning. The scans deepened, and the more the Dominion fleet probed, the more unsettling the findings became. The US Resolve was not just a ship, it was an enigma wrapped in metal and flesh. As Jeter observed the data streaming across his display, his unease grew. The first scan had shown a hull made of an alloy the Dominion had never encountered, seemingly layered and reinforced with technology that blended mechanical and biological elements. It was not just the ship's structure that intrigued the Dominion. It was how the ship functioned. The biological components embedded within the U.S. Resolve seemed to interact with its systems in ways no human or alien technology should. There were strange, organic tendrils that ran through the hull, forming conduits for energy and data. There were clusters of cells that appeared to be feeding off the ship's engines, their purpose unclear. The Dominion had seen bioengineering used in small-scale machines, but this was something else entirely. Something on a scale they could not comprehend. The ship was more than a vessel. It was alive. Jitter stood at the center of the command deck, his fingers gripping the armrests of his chair as the data continued to flood in. His mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Human technology was known to be crude by the Dominion standards, yet this ship defied all logic. It had been built with a mixture of precision and raw, unrefined power. No other species had ever done anything like it. The integration of biology into the ship's systems was so seamless that it seemed impossible. And yet, here it was, hovering in the void of space, challenging everything the Dominion thought they knew about warfare. The human warship remained eerily silent. No response to the Dominion's approach. No transmissions, just an unbroken stillness that made the air around the fleet thick with tension. Jitter couldn't help but wonder, had the ship's crew already abandoned it, or were they simply waiting for the right moment to strike? "Send a signal," Jitter ordered, his voice sharp. "Let's see if we can get a response." A Dominion officer began transmitting a standard diplomatic greeting, a protocol they had used in countless first contacts with other civilizations. However, when the signal was sent, there was nothing but static. No reply. The officers around him exchanged confused glances, uncertain of how to proceed. Jitter tapped a control on his chair, a signal to deepen the scan yet again. The new data showed something that made Jitter's stomach tighten. Embedded in the core of the ship was a power source far beyond anything the Dominion had ever encountered. It wasn't a typical engine. It was a bioorganic system that seemed to generate power by some unknown process, far more efficient than any technology known to the Dominion. "We should have left the moment we found this ship," one of the officers muttered from behind Jitter. "This isn't just a warship. It's something different." Jitter's eyes narrowed. His instincts told him that the U.S. Resolve wasn't just an abandoned relic of a long-dead human civilization. It was too complex, too advanced in its own way. If this ship was somehow still active, if there was a human crew on board, then they were not the kind of people the Dominion had dealt with before. He ordered the fleet to hold position and keep scanning, now looking for any signs of life. The lack of response from the warship's crew only deepened the mystery. Were they hidden? Were they waiting? Jitter knew that human history had been shaped by conflict and war. If this was a human warship, then it was designed for something beyond mere defense. It was designed for total war, and that realization filled Jitter with unease. The Dominion had fought countless enemies, each with their own methods of war, but none had ever used a ship like this. The U.S. Resolve was a symbol of something that had been lost to time, a brutal, unyielding force. And the Dominion, with all its might and technology, had no idea what kind of threat it might be facing. As the scans continued, a single, chilling thought crossed Jitter's mind. What kind of species would build a ship that was both weapon and organism? What kind of species would need such a thing? The answer, as troubling as it was, came quickly. Humans. And they were not the kind of species that would run from a fight. They were the kind that would fight to the very end. And the Dominion was about to learn just how far that fight could go. As the Dominion fleet hovered in the void, surrounded by the mysterious U.S. Resolve, Jitter couldn't shake the growing sense of dread. The ship was unlike anything they had encountered in the countless systems they had conquered. Its design, its technology, its strange biological components, all of it suggested that humanity, the species that had created this warship, was something far more complex and dangerous than they had imagined. Jitter ordered a full analysis of the human records in the Dominion's archives. They had encountered humans before, in scattered instances, but none had suggested the kind of threat this ship represented. The first human contact had been brief. The humans, when encountered in their early spacefaring days, were primitive, fighting amongst themselves and struggling with their own survival. They had been insignificant, a small and chaotic species that the Dominion dismissed as a potential threat. But this ship, the U.S. resolve, made it clear that humanity was no longer the weak, divided species they once were. Something had changed, and Jeter needed to know what. The records began to unfold a shocking history, one filled with war, bloodshed, and an unrelenting desire to survive. Humanity, Jeter learned, had been a species divided for most of its existence. For centuries, they fought endless wars over resources, ideologies, and power. They were a species marked by conflict, never truly united until the most recent eras. But what fascinated Jeter the most wasn't the destruction they wrought on each other, it was their resilience. No matter how many times they fell, they always rose again. No matter how many wars they fought, they never stopped fighting. Each war made them stronger, more adaptable. The Dominion scientists were still unable to comprehend the fusion of biology and technology in the U.S. resolve, but as Jeter dug deeper, he began to understand that the fusion wasn't just a technological marvel. It was a product of humanity's history, a history defined by survival and the will to overcome impossible odds. The human spirit, Jeter realized, was as much a weapon as any technology they had created. The records spoke of humanity's darkest moments, world wars that nearly wiped them out, but also their greatest triumphs. They had pushed the boundaries of space exploration and technology, crafting machines of war that were both efficient and devastating. But the most dangerous weapon humanity had was not their technology. It was their unyielding determination to keep fighting, to never surrender. In the face of extinction, they adapted. They grew stronger. They evolved, both biologically and technologically. The U.S. Resolve was a direct result of that evolution. A ship that was more than just a vessel of war. It was a living testament to humanity's ability to survive, adapt, and overcome. Jeter's thoughts turned dark as he realized just how dangerous this knowledge was. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. Other civilizations might have been defeated through superior technology, overwhelming force, or strategic manipulation. But humanity was different. They didn't just fight. They became their fights. Every battle, every loss, every hardship was a lesson they took forward. And each loss was an opportunity to become stronger. The U.S. Resolve, with its blend of ancient and organic technology, was a perfect example of this evolution. The ship had no fear of death. It embraced it. It had been built to survive the harshest conditions and to keep fighting no matter what. It was a ship that could repair itself, adapt to any situation, and keep pushing forward even when everything else fell apart. It was a ship that represented everything the Dominion feared, a species that didn't know how to stop fighting. As the records continued to unfold, Jeter found a detailed account of humanity's history of war. Each conflict, no matter how devastating, had forged them into something unbreakable. They had even built entire fleets capable of engaging entire star systems, designed not to retreat but to keep advancing, no matter the cost. The U.S. Resolve was part of that legacy, a warship designed for one purpose: to survive, to fight, and to never surrender. Jeter stood in the command center, his mind reeling with the implications. This was no simple warship. It was the embodiment of a species that had been shaped by war, a species that didn't know how to quit. They were a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless, and deadly. And the Dominion was now facing that force. The fear that had been growing in Jeter's chest began to spread throughout the fleet. What had once seemed like a simple encounter with an unknown ship had turned into something much more terrifying. Humanity was no longer just a species to be conquered. It was a force to be reckoned with. The U.S. Resolve had remained silent for what felt like an eternity. The Dominion fleet had spent hours scanning the ship, gathering as much data as possible, but it was still unclear what exactly lay within the massive vessel. Despite the ship's eerie dormancy, there was an undeniable tension in the air, a sense that something was about to happen. And then, without warning, the ship's engines came to life. At first, it was subtle, just a faint hum deep within the warship's core. But within moments, the sound grew louder, reverberating through the hull of the U.S. Resolve. Jetar's eyes widened as the ship's energy signatures began to shift. The once cold, dormant warship was stirring from its long slumber. It wasn't just waking up, it was activating, and it seemed to be reacting to the presence of the Dominion fleet. The crew on the Ekthar fell into silence, their attention focused entirely on the human warship. Jetar's mind raced. Was there still a human crew on board? Were they preparing to defend their ship, or was this simply an automated system coming online? He couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain. The U.S. Resolve wasn't just some derelict ship. It was far more than they had initially thought. "Status report," Jetar barked, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. His officers scrambled to assess the ship's sudden activation. The weapons systems began to glow faintly, and the ship's exterior appeared to shift, as if some organic component inside was growing or adjusting. Jetar's gut told him that this was no ordinary ship. This was a weapon that was alive in ways the Dominion had never imagined. The U.S. Resolve slowly turned, its enormous bulk now facing the Dominion fleet. The ships around Jetar's flagship readied themselves for a potential threat, weapons systems primed and shields raised. The crew waited for orders, eyes fixed on the human warship, unsure of what to expect next. Jetar's mind worked quickly, considering every possible outcome. Before he could make a decision, something unexpected happened. A transmission from the U.S. Resolve cut through the silence of space. It wasn't the usual diplomatic greeting the Dominion had become accustomed to, nor was it a simple request for communication. The transmission was a direct feed, a visual display that flickered to life on the screens of every Dominion vessel. It was crude, a mixture of distorted images and audio, but unmistakably human. The feed showed humans, their faces streaked with dirt and blood, standing in the ruins of their own cities. The scenes were violent, chaotic, images of war and destruction, of societies breaking apart and rebuilding. The message wasn't a peaceful plea for mercy or negotiations. It was a stark recounting of humanity's past, their wars, their survival, and their relentless drive to overcome. There was no fear in the faces of the humans in the transmission, only a deep, unshakable resolve. They had faced annihilation countless times, but they always found a way to survive. Jetar's eyes narrowed. He understood now. The U.S. Resolve wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of everything humanity had endured. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving only a lingering sense of uncertainty in the air. The crew aboard the Ekthar stared at their screens in stunned silence. They had been prepared for an encounter with an alien species, but not this. The words of the message echoed in Jetar's mind. "We are ready. We will never surrender." Jetar leaned forward in his chair, staring at the hulking form of the U.S. Resolve on his screen. He had seen empires rise and fall, civilizations crumble before the might of the Dominion. But this was different. The human species had survived the impossible time and time again, and now they were showing the Dominion what true determination looked like. This was a warship unlike anything they had ever faced, and it was powered not just by technology, but by the unyielding spirit of a species that refused to be defeated. The U.S. Resolve slowly began to power its weapons. The hum of its engines filled the void as the Dominion fleet braced itself for what was to come. Jetar knew one thing for certain. This was not just another battle. This was a fight for survival, and humanity had already shown it was willing to fight to the very end. The Dominion fleet was on high alert. Every ship's weapons were primed, shields raised, and every officer standing by for orders. The U.S. Resolve had just transmitted a chilling message, not one of peace or negotiation, but a declaration of unyielding strength. The warship's weapon systems were now fully powered, its organic systems thrumming like a living entity. It was clear. The Dominion had just awoken something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. Jitter stood at the center of the command deck, his gaze fixed on the U.S. Resolve. His mind worked quickly, calculating every possible outcome. The battle was inevitable now. The humans had not shown fear. They had shown defiance. And in their eyes, he saw something that made his heart beat faster. They were not afraid to die. Maintain formation. Jitter ordered sharply. Keep our distance for now, but be ready to retaliate if they make a move. His officers responded in unison, every station becoming a hive of activity. Weapons engineers checked targeting systems, tactical officers ran simulations of potential scenarios, and crew members monitored the human warship's movements. Jitter knew the Dominion fleet was vastly superior in numbers and firepower. They had destroyed entire civilizations before, but there was something unsettling about this encounter. Humanity was different. They had something the Dominion did not, the will to fight for survival, no matter the odds. The U.S. Resolve was now fully turned to face the fleet, its weapons charging. The massive warship had two colossal cannons on either side, glowing with power, while smaller pulse turrets lined the edges of its hull. Jitter's sensors showed more organic tendrils snaking out from the ship's core, wrapping around its exterior and interfacing with the weapon systems. It was a fusion of the living and the mechanical, a terrifying synergy that no one in the Dominion had expected. Without warning, the human warship fired. The first blast shook the void, a beam of concentrated energy tearing through space. It collided with the nearest Dominion vessel, the Xerath, a formidable destroyer, and the impact was catastrophic. The beam sliced through the ship's shields like they were nothing, and the Xerath was instantly engulfed in a massive explosion. Debris scattered in all directions, and the once proud destroyer was reduced to a cloud of vaporized metal. Jitter watched in stunned silence. The power behind that shot was unlike anything he had seen before. "Return fire," Jitter ordered, his voice cold and commanding. His fleet, now fully aware of the deadly force they were up against, responded quickly. The fleet unleashed a barrage of plasma and kinetic projectiles at the U.S. Resolve. Ships moved into position, utilizing the advanced Dominion tactics of coordinated fire and flanking maneuvers. It should have been a slaughter. But the U.S. Resolve wasn't just a stationary target. With surprising agility for a vessel of its size, the human warship shifted, its organic components adjusting with a fluidity that seemed impossible. The energy blasts from the Dominion ships collided with its hull, but each hit seemed to dissipate into the ship's living systems, absorbed and rerouted into its own defenses. The U.S. Resolve didn't just withstand the Dominion's attack, it adapted to it, using its own energy to heal and reinforce itself. Jitter's heart pounded in his chest. The U.S. Resolve was not only capable of surviving their onslaught, it was getting stronger. With every blow struck, it seemed to regenerate, feeding on the very attacks it was receiving. The fusion of technology and biology was evolving in real time, a perfect storm of organic and mechanical resilience. Another shot rang out from the U.S. Resolve, this time hitting the Veyron, a battleship in the rear of the formation. The explosion sent shockwaves through the fleet, and Jitter's blood ran cold as he watched the mighty ship crumble. The humans weren't just fighting. They were winning, and the Dominion fleet, though powerful, was starting to feel the weight of their relentless assault. The commanders of the other Dominion ships were beginning to report more damage, more destruction, and an enemy that was not backing down. The U.S. Resolve was living up to its name. It was determined to keep fighting, no matter the cost. Jitter clenched his fists. He had faced overwhelming odds before, but nothing like this. He couldn't afford to underestimate humanity any longer. This wasn't just a battle for space. It was a battle for survival, and the U.S. Resolve was showing the Dominion just how far humanity would go to win. Redirect all fire to their core. Jedar ordered urgently. Target their power systems. We need to disable them before this ship regenerates completely. But even as he gave the command, he knew the odds were slipping away. Humanity's warship had just shown them that when it came to surviving and fighting, it would stop at nothing. The Dominion was about to face a truth they had never considered. This fight would not be won through firepower alone. Jedar's mind raced as he watched the Dominion fleet struggle to break through the U.S. Resolve's defenses. The Ichthar remained in the center, but the other ships of the fleet were beginning to suffer heavy damage. The Veyron had already been destroyed, and other vessels were limping, their shields cracked and weapons systems malfunctioning. The U.S. Resolve had proven itself a force of nature, resilient, adaptive, and ruthless in its counterattacks. Each blast they sent at the warship seemed to strengthen it, as though it was learning from their every move. Direct all remaining fire at their core. Jedar barked again, his voice tinged with desperation. The U.S. Resolve was too dangerous now, and unless they struck quickly, the battle would be lost. The Ichthar's weapons discharged once more, massive plasma cannons firing at the warship's center. However, the impact barely caused a ripple. The Resolve's biomechanical hull absorbed the blasts, its tendrils shifting and repairing the damage as if it had anticipated the attack. "Sir, we can't break through," an officer reported, his voice strained. "The ship is evolving faster than we can respond. We're losing control of the engagement." Jedar clenched his teeth. He had faced countless enemies before, but never one like this. He thought back to what he had learned from the Dominion's archives. Humanity's history of warfare had been brutal, relentless, and unforgiving. But this ship, it was a culmination of everything humanity had learned from their wars, a living testament to their refusal to surrender. The U.S. Resolve wasn't simply a ship. It was a reflection of humanity itself. It was a weapon that had been forged in the fires of conflict, driven by a deep-seated need to survive no matter the cost. And now, it was adapting faster than Jedar's fleet could react. The Dominion was being outplayed. "We need a new strategy," Jedar muttered to himself, pacing back and forth on the command deck. Every moment was slipping away. The enemy was adapting with each second, and he could feel the tide of battle turning. It wasn't just a fight for space anymore. It was a fight for dominance over the stars. "Prepare the Ichthar's biostrike unit," Jedar ordered, his voice cold and resolute. His officers exchanged confused glances. The Ichthar had a unique weapon, a biostrike unit designed for situations where conventional weaponry would fail. It was an experimental system, one that used a combination of Dominion bioengineering and advanced virus tech, capable of infiltrating and dismantling the biological systems of an enemy ship. It was dangerous, but in this situation, it might be their only chance. "Are you certain, Commander?" an officer asked, hesitating. "It's risky, if it backfires." "I know," Jedar interrupted, "but we don't have time to waste. If we can't disable their core, we'll lose everything." Reluctantly, the officer nodded, and the crew began activating the biostrike system. The Ichthar's sleek, dark hull began to hum as its bioengineering systems were brought online. The virus, designed to break down organic systems, would be launched into the U.S. Resolve's core. It was a delicate operation, one that would require precision. But if they succeeded, it would cripple the human warship from within. The Dominion fleet fired once more, all ships coordinating their efforts to distract the U.S. Resolve while the Ichthar prepared the strike. The human warship's weapons fired back, but Jedar had learned from the earlier engagements. They shifted their positioning, keeping the Resolve's focus on the weaker vessels. The Ichthar was now out of the direct line of fire, and the biostrike unit was almost ready. A tense silence hung in the air as the seconds ticked by. The Ichthar's biostrike unit was nearing its final stages of deployment. Jedar's mind was sharp, every fiber of his being focused on the battle ahead. It was now or never. "Launch the biostrike," he ordered. The command was given, and a small yet deadly device shot from the Ichthar. heading straight for the U.S. Resolve's core. The strike traveled through the void, weaving past the ship's defensive systems. As it neared its target, the Resolve's organic tendrils attempted to intercept it, but the biostrike slipped through, embedding itself deep within the warship's core. The crew of the Ichthar held their breath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the warship's weapons faltered. The hum of its engines slowed, and a series of energy pulses rippled through its systems. Jeter's heart skipped a beat. The biostrike had worked. It was destabilizing the ship's core. "Target their weapons now," Jeter shouted. The fleet responded immediately, pouring every remaining shot into the now vulnerable warship. The U.S. Resolve fired one last retaliatory blast, but it was weak, lacking the power it had previously displayed. The battle was far from over, but the Dominion now had the upper hand. The tide had turned, but Jeter knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's fight for survival was far from finished, and the warship's true nature had only begun to reveal itself. The U.S. Resolve was visibly weakening. Its once mighty weapons flickered, energy reserves dwindling as the biostrike began to tear through its core. But Jeter knew better than to think victory was assured. Humanity had already shown that it could endure, adapt, and overcome. The warship might be damaged, but it wasn't out of the fight yet. "Status report." Jeter barked, his gaze fixed on the damage reports flooding in from the fleet. The Ichthar's biostrike had caused significant disruption to the U.S. Resolve, but the human warship's organic systems were proving resilient. It was regenerating, slowly but surely, the biological components repairing themselves faster than Jeter's scientists had predicted. "Commander, we're seeing localized repairs on the outer hull," an officer reported, their voice tight with tension. "The core breach is stabilizing, and their weapons are beginning to recharge." Jeter clenched his fists. He had expected as much. This wasn't just a ship. It was a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving and adapting. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this, a force that didn't just resist but embraced destruction in order to overcome it. "We cannot afford to let it recover," Jeter said through gritted teeth. "If it regains full operational capacity, we're finished. Prepare a final assault, all ships." His fleet had already taken heavy losses, but there was no choice now. This would be a fight to the death. Jeter had seen many battles and countless victories, but none had felt like this. The U.S. Resolve wasn't simply another opponent to crush. It was a testament to the very nature of humanity, their drive to survive, no matter the cost. The fleet repositioned itself, closing in for a concentrated strike on the human warship's core. The Ichthar, now at the front, charged ahead, its weapons primed and ready. Jeter watched as his ships fired relentlessly, plasma bolts streaking through the void, each one aimed at the weak points in the U.S. Resolve's hull. The energy blasts caused temporary flashes of vulnerability, but each time, the ship healed, regenerating at an alarming rate. "This is it," Jeter muttered to himself. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The final act in a war that had begun with an overconfidence that now felt misplaced. They had underestimated humanity, and they would pay the price. The U.S. Resolve fired back, its remaining weaponry unleashing a barrage of devastating energy blasts. Jeter's fleet scattered, trying to avoid the incoming fire, but one of the ships, the Harnack, took a direct hit. The vessel's shields buckled and collapsed, and the ship exploded in a fiery blaze. The crew's screams echoed in Jeter's mind, but he shoved them aside. There was no room for hesitation. "We need to disable their core, now," Jeter ordered, his voice filled with urgency. "Concentrate fire on their engine bay. We can't let them recover again." The fleet responded, their fire focused with surgical precision. The U.S. Resolve's engines flickered as another series of Dominion blasts hit their mark. For a moment, it seemed as though the warship might finally crumble under the relentless barrage. The human vessel shuddered, its shields flickering, and its massive hull groaned under the pressure. Then something unexpected happened. From the heart of the U.S. Resolve, a wave of energy exploded outward, radiating in all directions. The blast was massive, enough to send shockwaves through space, and it hit the Dominion fleet with brutal force. Jetar's eyes widened as he saw several ships buckle under the sudden shockwave. The Ichthar was hit first, its shields shattering, the ship groaning as its systems were overpowered by the force. Other ships, caught off guard, were similarly damaged. "Report," Jetar demanded, trying to keep his composure. His command deck shook, the lights flickering as the shockwave reverberated through the ship. "We've lost power to the starboard side," one officer cried out. "Systems are failing. Shields are at 30% and falling." Jetar gritted his teeth. The U.S. Resolve wasn't just defending itself. It was launching a final desperate counteroffensive. It was an act of sheer will, a last-ditch effort to turn the tide of battle. "Do not falter," Jetar roared. "We finish this now." The fleet regrouped, closing in around the U.S. Resolve once more. It was clear that the human warship was on its last legs, but it wasn't finished. The final strike would require everything they had left. Jetar knew that if they didn't act decisively now, the U.S. Resolve would somehow find a way to keep fighting, keep adapting. The fleet unleashed their final barrage, focusing all their fire on the warship's core. The U.S. Resolve fired back, but this time there was something different about it. The blast was weaker, more desperate. The warship's energy reserves were all but depleted. Jetar could see it, just a little more, and the human warship would be finished. With one final, concentrated blast, the Ichthar's main cannon struck the heart of the U.S. Resolve. A massive explosion erupted in space, the light brighter than 1,000 suns, as the U.S. Resolve's core collapsed. Jetar's heart raced. The battle was finally over. But as the last remnants of the U.S. Resolve disintegrated in the void, Jetar couldn't shake the feeling that the true nature of humanity had only just begun to reveal itself. The dust of battle began to settle. The once proud U.S. Resolve, humanity's last line of defense, had been obliterated in a final brilliant flash of light. The remaining fragments of the warship drifted aimlessly through space, a reminder of the incredible force that had once been unleashed. Yet even as the Dominion fleet limped through the aftermath, Jetar couldn't shake the feeling that the fight wasn't truly over. The warship had been destroyed, but its message had been made clear. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Despite the Dominion's overwhelming technological superiority, the U.S. Resolve had fought, bled, and adapted with a tenacity Jetar had never encountered before. It was a reminder of the drive that fueled every human in the galaxy. A drive to survive, to endure, no matter what the cost. The Ichthar limped forward, its once pristine hull now battered and scorched from the battle. Jetar stood on the command deck, silent, eyes narrowed, as he watched the remnants of the human warship. His officers remained at their posts, but a somber air had descended over the fleet. Victory had been achieved, but it felt hollow, incomplete. "Commander, we've lost nearly a third of our fleet," one of his officers reported, their voice tinged with disbelief. "We were forced to abandon several ships, and others are severely damaged." The human warship, it was more than we could handle. Jetar didn't respond immediately. He turned his gaze to the damaged ships that were slowly regrouping. The human vessel had made the Dominion bleed, and the scars of the battle would remain long after the wreckage of the U.S. Resolve had drifted into the void. It was a humbling realization. The Dominion had been victorious, but at what cost? "Send a message to the High Council," Jetar finally said, his voice even. "Inform them that the U.S. Resolve has been neutralized. But we must prepare. This was just one ship. Humanity will not be easily defeated. I am certain they have more, and they will return." The officer nodded, but Jetar could see the unease in their eyes. The Dominion had underestimated humanity from the start. They had believed they could crush them with ease, just as they had done with countless other species. But the U.S. resolve had proven that humanity was different. They had survived against impossible odds, and they had fought with a determination that no amount of firepower could suppress. Jeter knew that the destruction of the U.S. resolve would not be the end of the war. It was merely the beginning. Humanity was not just a species to conquer. It was an adversary that would fight for every inch of its survival. And Jeter knew that the Dominion would need to adapt, just as the humans had. "Prepare to depart," Jeter ordered, his voice firm. "We have won this battle, but the war is far from over. We must return to the heart of the Dominion and reassess our strategies. Humanity is a threat unlike any we faced before. We cannot afford to underestimate them again." As the fleet turned away from the remains of the U.S. resolve, Jeter couldn't help but think of the faces he had seen in the transmission from the warship. The humans, bloodied and bruised, standing defiantly in the ruins of their cities. Their resolve had been evident, and it haunted him. The Dominion had won, but it was not a victory born from certainty. It was a victory born from sheer force. And even then, it had come at a tremendous cost. In the end, Jeter understood one thing. Humanity would never stop fighting. The U.S. resolve had shown them that. The Dominion had crushed the warship, but the spirit of humanity was far from extinguished. Jeter realized that the true battle for the future of the galaxy had only just begun, and the price of victory would be far steeper than he could have ever imagined.